Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, August 6, 2021. The hypocrisy of attacking wealthy borrowers. A July 13th article in the Wall Street Journal points out that more and more wealthy people are purchasing things they want, not by selling their investment assets, but by borrowing against their value and using the borrowed funds to make their purchases. They point out that Morgan Stanley has $68.1 billion worth of securities-based and other non-mortgage loans outstanding. Bank of America has $62.4 billion in securities-based loans. Tesla chief executive Elon Musk and cable billionaire John Malone have pledged more than $150 billion of their stock as loan collateral. Fred Smith, founder, chairman, and CEO of FedEx Corporation, has pledged $598 million worth of his company's stock, about 23.4% of his holdings, for loans as of July 2020. By borrowing against their assets rather than selling them, startup founders can monetize their stakes without losing control of their companies. And if an asset appreciates faster than the interest rate on the loan, the borrowers come out ahead. And finally, under current law, investors and their heirs don't pay income taxes until their shares are sold. Now, assets passed on to heirs may be subject to estate taxes, but the heirs pay capital gains tax only when the asset is sold. Now, the Biden administration wants to stop this abuse by increasing the capital gains tax rate from 23.8% to 43.4%. And they're also exploring ways to prevent these wealthy people from borrowing against their assets. Under present federal tax law, the assets in a person's estate are valued as of the date the owner dies. Then, when an heir sells an inherited asset, he or she pays taxes only on the appreciation that occurred while the asset was actually in their hands. For example, a parent buys a stock at $30 a share. On the date the parent dies, the stock is worth $100 a share. Now, if an heir holds that stock for a year and then sells it for $110 a share, the heir would owe tax only on the $10 per share that the stock rose while he or she actually owned it. Now, the smart people in D.C. think that this step up in basis from $30 to $100 in the above example is abusing the system. And they're proposing that this step up in basis apply only to the first $1 million of an estate's value. For estates valued at over $1 million, those assets above $1 million would retain their original basis. Consequently, in the above example, if the Biden administration gets its way, it's possible that an heir selling the stock for $110 a share would owe taxes not on the $10 a share that the stock rose while it was in their possession, but on the entire $80 a share the stock rose between the time the parent purchased it and the time the heir sold it. And, of course, the capital gains tax rate would be 43.4%, not the 23.8% that it is today. Now, of course, the smart people only care about punishing the wealthy, but don't expect them to play by the same rules they impose on other people. And it's this blatant hypocrisy that is most distressing. Now, let's look at home equity lines of credit. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, balances on home equity lines of credit dropped by $2 billion to $485 billion. Now, why do ordinary people have and use home equity lines of credit? Well, for many of us, the value of our homes, our principal investment, has increased. Consequently, many homes are now worth significantly more than the outstanding balances on the mortgage. Now, the difference between how much a homeowner owes on his house and how much the house is worth is the equity. Now, let's say that a married couple bought a home in 2010 for $200,000. They made a down payment of $50,000 and financed the balance with a $150,000 mortgage. Now, the home is worth $400,000 and the outstanding balance on the mortgage is $140,000. Now, this means that if they sold the home for $400,000 and paid off the $140,000 they still owe on it, they would have $260,000 less closing costs in their pockets. Now, under current law, if the couple sold their home, they will owe no federal income taxes because gains up to $500,000 are not taxable. However, the couple doesn't want to sell their home. They want to stay there, but they need $50,000 to remodel the kitchen or put in a pool. Now, if they have $50,000 worth of stock or other assets they could sell, they could get their money that way, but they would have to pay taxes on the profits from that sale. Now, what is likely a better solution? Take out a home equity line of credit. They can go to a bank, obtain a $50,000 home equity line of credit loan. They'll likely pay between 2.5% and 6% depending on their credit rating and the amount of equity in the home. In addition, if the money is spent improving their home, then any interest paid on the home equity line of credit is tax deductible, just like the mortgage interest. Well, that is in the unlikely event that the couple are in the 10% of federal taxpayers who are still itemizing deductions. Now, the couple then improves their home and enjoys it for the rest of their lives. When they pass away, they leave it to their 2 children. Now, assume the house is worth $800,000 at the time the 2 children inherit it. Again, under current law, if the children sell the house for $800,000, they would owe no tax since there was no increase in value during the time that they owned it. Now, it seems that the smart people have decided that it's just not fair that some people can borrow more than others. Therefore, it's up to them to devise a new set of very complicated Internal Revenue Code rules that address this grievous injustice. Of course, these complicated new rules will require that more bureaucrats be hired to enforce them, while at the same time providing more lucrative opportunities for tax attorneys and other tax professionals. Now, all of this is totally unnecessary. It just makes an already incomprehensible tax code even more complicated while doing a lot more harm than good. Now let's look at the FAIRtax alternative. Rather than allowing the smart people to decide for us what's fair and just, why not replace the present corrupt and unworkable federal income tax with the FAIRtax? The FAIRtax lets people, not bureaucrats, decide how much tax they pay and when they pay it. When people pay their federal taxes when they make retail purchases of new goods and services, then it doesn't matter where the money to make any purchase came from. Income, sale of investment, loans, gifts, or an inheritance. It's all the same. Now, the FAIRtax is based on the simple concept that people should receive everything they earn and that the government should not have any control over their money. With the FAIRtax, we get our entire paycheck. We also get 100% of our investment proceeds. We can borrow money and use it for anything we want with no tax consequences. If we use the borrowed money to purchase used goods, then we pay no FAIRtax. If we use the borrowed money to purchase new retail goods and services, then we'll pay the FAIRtax. Now, of course, the FAIRtax has many other benefits to our economy and our way of life, but it's no surprise that the smart people in D.C. don't like it. They arrogantly believe that only they are smart enough to know what's ultimately fair or just, and they oppose any system that diminishes their power and empowers ordinary people to make decisions for themselves. The ruling class and their minions don't like it either because they're profiting greatly from the current income payroll tax system. In conclusion, St. Augustine said, "Hope has 2 beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they don't remain the way they are." Now, isn't it time for us to get angry at the largely unelected smart people who believe it's their right and duty to decide for us what is fair and just? Now, isn't it time to tell the ruling class and their minions in D.C. that their days of making huge profits from the rest of us are over? We must have the courage to force these smart people to quit trying to be our moral and ethical judges and instead devote their time and effort to making the government more efficient in providing the services that government is supposed to provide, things like infrastructure and defense, for example. Now, if the ruling class and their minions in D.C. don't like it that we're taking huge amounts of money away from them, we should repeat Clark Gable's famous closing words in Gone with the Wind. "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." If you want to prevent the IRS from being further weaponized to punish those of us who may object to the D.C. opinions and dictates of what's good for us, then help us pass the FAIRtax. The IRS will be gone, and we'll pay our taxes when we make retail purchases. We, not the smart people in the ruling class and their minions in D.C., will decide how much federal tax we pay and when we pay it. If you have friends who don't know about the FAIRtax, send them to FAIRtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your member of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the FAIRtax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.